Baseball Prospectus has released its 2026 PECOTA projections.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Tuesday, February 17th, 2026. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Welcome in, everybody. Happy Tuesday to all. Today we do an episode that we do every single year since I have taken over for this show. Now, going on 4, almost 5 years, maybe 4.5, something like that. Anyway, we will be doing our annual PECOTA projections show. What are PECOTA projections, you ask? Well, I'm glad you asked. Baseball Prospectus, one of the bigger baseball publications that are out there, does a lot of really big work in scouting, especially every year they run their PECOTA simulations. I don't even know how many times, 1 million, 1 billion, 1 trillion, maybe it's only like 1,000. I have no idea. But they run their projections however many times and then come to an average number, a win-loss record for every team in baseball. But the reason that I love PECOTA so much, is it's one of the more accurate, historically, one of the more accurate team projection models that are out there. Pretty much every website has their own projection formula and model at this point. Fangraphs has like 18 of them, which I don't say in like a slanderous way. I love Fangraphs, shout out. But, there's a lot out there is my point. PECOTA is historically one of the more accurate ones, but I also love it because it not only highlights an exact average, but it actually showcases what the most likely and unlikely outcomes are in the bell curve of all of the simulations. And I find that part of it fascinating because that's not always necessarily the final average number. Right, is going to be you get to see the peaks and valleys, what's most likely, what's maybe second most likely, etc. So we start off obviously with your Detroit Tigers, but as the show goes on, we'll venture off into the rest of the AL Central, and then obviously the rest of the American League and all of baseball. The Tigers currently are projected. These ones are updated like every week or something during the season. Projected to have an 83.4 win season, which equates to a 78.6 loss season. Now, if we're rounding up and down to the nearest whole number, that puts the Tigers at 83 and 79 for the 2026 season. Maybe a little bit underwhelming. There's some interesting numbers that I want to kind of dive deeper into. The reason for that number has nothing to do with the pitching. So again, one of the many reasons why I love PECOTA is it gives you odds at winning the division, odds at winning the wild card, odds at making the postseason, but it also gives you projected runs scored and projected runs allowed based on all of the sims that it had. The Tigers' runs against number is 670 over the course of the season. That is not only comfortably the best in the AL Central by 22 runs to the next closest, and then like 53 runs to the next closest after that, but it is the third lowest number in the American League. The only teams that allowed fewer runs than the Detroit Tigers, again, according to this projection model, will be the Toronto Blue Jays at 660, so 10 fewer than the Tigers. And then the Seattle Mariners, who have just an absurd, ridiculous 632 number. That is, I really quickly, I'm going to check the rest of the league. I can't imagine that anyone else is even remotely close to that number. That's the lowest I've seen in the 4 or 5 years that I've been doing this show every year. 640, I guess, is the next closest in all of baseball, and that is the Dodgers, who are spending $1 billion. So there you have it. The Tigers are projected to have one of the better pitching staffs in the sport. The issue, I say issue, they're projected to have 83 to 84 wins. That's not terrible, but that's certainly a step back from the, 87 wins, 88 wins that they had a year ago when they made the postseason. They likely don't make the postseason with just 83 wins. The reason for that is the offense, to no surprise to anyone. The Tigers have, in this model, projected a run scored number of 689. That is the third most in the American League Central alone and is in the bottom half, certainly, of the American League, and obviously then in Major League Baseball. They're probably even like right on that verge of bottom third in the entire American League at least. So these are all things that I think a lot of people have concerns about the offense. I know that a lot of people have concerns about the offense, but nobody is super, terrified that the pitching is going to be terrible. They're so deep in that department. So there's good and bads here. I know everyone's going to immediately point to, well, the offense struggled at the end of last season, and the front office signed 0 major league bats. I agree. I think that's preposterous. I think that's absolutely absurd that is the case. I agree with you, frustrated fan. Okay? In the same breath, I think that's probably... Here's my only issue with it. It's not even necessarily the number itself, okay? I think that there are reasonable concerns to be had with the offense. My issue is that the Minnesota Twins are projected to score 21 more runs than the Detroit Tigers. I've been wrong plenty of times in my life, and I've been wrong-er. But I would genuinely be stunned if the Minnesota Twins not only scored 21 more runs than the Tigers, but at that, the Twins are projected to finish third by this model. I personally have the Twins in fifth. I legitimately have the Chicago White Sox ahead of the Minnesota Twins going into this season. Now, again, maybe I'm totally off base here, and the young, kind of falling apart but somewhat still together core that the Twins have is not going to completely bottom out. But that's kind of where I have a little bit of a head scratching moment, I guess, if you will. Now the Twins still projected to finish under 500. The biggest surprise here to me is not even the Twins in third, it's the Guardians in fourth. A projected 76 and 86 finish for the Cleveland Guardians puts them just 7 wins ahead of the Chicago White Sox, so they have projected in fifth place. We'll go to the rest of the American League Central and obviously keep talking Tigers right after this. First, though, got to talk to y'all about our good friends over at TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life, and this year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off to someone else and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert start to finish without the stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online, and they will handle everything from W-2s to self-employment forms and work to get you every deduction possible. You can upload your documents and go about your day and get updates right into the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it all. So for a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, just file by February 28th of this year. Take taxes off of your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2, Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, as always, making us your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back tomorrow as we continue our spring training content here on Locked On. So thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Now, baseball is back, and you can lock in even further by joining the Locked On Everydayer Club, which gets you ad-free episodes and access to our members-only group chat on Discord. It has me and all the other everydayers as a part of it. For the next week or so, you can use code SPRING for a free month of being an everydayer as well. Just go to lockedonpodcasts.com/everydayer or tap in the link in the show notes to get started. Today, we discuss PECOTA's 2026 projections. The Tigers projected to have a second-place finish in the American League Central, with the Kansas City Royals projected to take home the AL Central crown for the first time in, well, a while for them. The interesting thing with this, the Royals projected to have an 85-77 finish, so only a 2-game difference, and even that, if you're going by the decimal point, it's actually less than 2 full wins. You're talking about 1.8 wins that separate the two teams. The Royals projected to have a good pitching staff, but not as good as the Tigers. However, projected to have a much more prolific offense, which I find kind of interesting. The Royals have some, objectively more productive position players. It starts with Bobby Witt Jr., obviously, who has the potential in any given season to put up legitimately a 10-WAR year. But they also now have Vinny Pasquantino, hopefully will be fully healthy for them. That's obviously a nice bat in the heart of their lineup, as well as a few other players. But I still think, like, when you're talking depth, I'm not sure the Royals' bottom third of the lineup stacks up as well as the Tigers' bottom third. Not that either are something necessarily to write home about. And at the end of the day, I'm comparing like the bottom of the lineup when the heart of the lineup is going to be your biggest run producers. A lot of this has to do with what kind of year you get from Torkelson, what kind of year you get from Riley Greene, who's obviously been a big talking point with the amount of strikeouts he had last year, especially down the stretch. And honestly, someone who I think deserves a lot more of a microscope under them is Kerry Carpenter. And that's not like slander. Anytime I point out this take, I have people that are like, how can you possibly think Kerry is bad or whatever? He's been one of, if not the best hitter on the team for the last 3 years when he's been healthy. Okay, I'm not denying that. And I think that he absolutely can take another step forward and be something. But he had a sub-800 OPS last year for a reason. That's because his OBP was 290. Like, there is just a large step that has to be taken. My point is not to harp on any of them individually. It's all three of them. That entire heart of the lineup, and then you can even throw like Glaber in there, right? In the second half, Glaber was really poor, but in the first half, he was great. All four of those guys, really, you have to see marginal improvements from last season in 2026 if you want that number of, projected runs scored to take a step in the right direction. And I think all four of them deserve, praise and criticism on both ends of that line of things. Now, again, the Royals, the interesting thing I find here, Royals projected 60% chance of making the postseason, a 46.5% chance to win the division. The Tigers with a 32% chance, 32.5% chance to win the American League Central, a 46% chance to make the postseason. So less than 50%, according to PECOTA. The big thing that I kind of hyped up at the beginning of the show was these graphs. And you can just search PECOTA projections. It's the first thing that comes up, but it's at baseballprospectus.com. Is they have bell curves for, the most likely outcome is obviously the peak of the bell curve. Then you have the two extremes. Then you can kind of look at the 80-20 percentile outcomes as well with all of these projections. The thing that I find fascinating is that the Royals do have their highest peak is higher than anyone else in the division, which is why they find themselves ahead of, everyone in terms of average projection or average record. But the Tigers actually have a little bit of a higher blip when you talk about, I don't even know how to word this in a correct way. I've done this 4 years in a row and I still don't have like a good English way to relay this without showing you the graphic and like pointing at it. But the Tigers have a higher peak, if you will, than the Royals. The Tigers also just have a very lower median, which makes it sound like the 83.5 win loss that it was being talked about is an average number, sure, of all of the projections that are ran, but it's almost more likely for the Tigers to either completely crash and burn or flourish a little bit. And that's a little bit dramatic that way, just to kind of highlight what I'm seeing at the graph. But there's a little bit of a dip in the very middle of where you'd presume, the peak would be for the Tigers and where the peak is for the Royals. It's just a perfect kind of bell curve. The Tigers a little bit more has like a dip in the middle of its forehead. And that's, again, to indicate that there's a lot of projections of the Tigers finishing with a win total that's closer to about 500. There's also a little bit more likely of a dip for them to finish with closer to like a high 80s win than there is for them to finish with around 83 or 84 wins. And again, it's not that dramatic. I'm just being overly dramatic to kind of, paint the picture a little bit. But I found that interesting. What line is this? 55th percentile outcome for the Tigers is higher than the 55th projected percentile outcome for the Royals. It's just that the 50th percentile is higher in Kansas City. So something, food for thought, if you will. The Twins are kind of all over the place. There's lumps and bumps all over this thing. The Guardians is very smooth. It's a very smooth bell curve, and they just think the Guardians are what they are, and they project them to finish with a below 500 record. And I think the important thing to remember, and why I don't take any solace in this, for as much as I love and appreciate the PECOTA projections, the Guardians are projected to have a bad record like every year since I've been born, and they never do. They're just the most obvious. Like, it doesn't matter what kind of talent is on the roster. They're going to go out there and get 17 infield singles in the third inning and then bat, 090 the rest of the season and finish, go have an 800 win percentage in 1-run games and somehow find themselves to like an 88 win season. And it's just going to be infuriating, and I'm going to hate every second of it, and it's going to happen no matter what. So I don't even care. Yes, their talent shouldn't be as high as it is. If they're wearing a different jersey, they'd probably be projected in my head to have that win total, but I don't even care at this point. The Guardians are what the Guardians are. The White Sox being comfortably below the Twins is a little bit surprising to me, but this is also the highest that the White Sox have been projected to finish since I started doing this, I think. This is a projected 70-win White Sox team, which is still, 92 losses, but like, given where the depth that this team was at the peak of their rebuild, 70 wins is a win for them at this point. Taking a look at the rest of the American League, the Blue Jays projected to win the American League East, but by less than half a win. The New York Yankees at 88.1, the Toronto Blue Jays at 88.5. The AL West, the Mariners projected to not only win the AL West, the Mariners are projected to have the second best record in all of Major League Baseball, with a 93-win and 69-loss 2026 campaign, also giving them a 91% chance to make the postseason. The only team with a better percent chance to make the postseason is the Dodgers, who have a projected 99.9% chance at postseason play and a projected 104-win season. Both are the biggest that I've seen. I think there's always one 99% chance team, but I've never seen a win total that is above 104 wins, which is where the Dodgers currently reside. Couple other interesting notes I want to touch on in the American League and kind of the wild card race there. Then we'll kind of expand, talk a little bit of National League before I send you off on your way. All right, we'll do that right after this. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Third and final segment, Locked On Tigers. I appreciate you all so much for tuning in. As always, today we talk about PECOTA projections, one of my favorite episodes of the year. I highly encourage you to not just listen to me yap and blabber about like things I'm looking at on a screen. Go look at it for yourself. It is such an interesting tool, and they play the games for a reason. Okay, I am not here to tell you. I have to reiterate this every year as well. Like, I am not here to tell you that these are exactly what's going to happen, and the Tigers are going to have exactly 83 wins, and they have no chance at winning the division. No, obviously not. I actually think the Tigers should be favored to win the American League Central. I disagree with them on that, but I think it's important to get a third-party outsider perspective on what your team is doing, because I feel like I'm a victim of it more than anybody. We get a little bit tunnel vision on just hearing, myself and other Tigers beat writers talk about the team. I think it's important to kind of zoom out and talk about what other people think of the Detroit Tigers this season as well. Talking about the rest of the American League, highest playoff odds outside of the Mariners and then the Toronto Blue Jays, who only have a 72% chance, which I find interesting. The Yankees only have a 70% chance. The Tigers, as I mentioned, 46%. The Houston Astros, 54%. The Texas Rangers, 45.5%. The Orioles, 45%. Then you start getting into the 30s and the teams that have really no shot. One of the things I find kind of interesting is the Angels are projected to have the worst record in the American League at 66 wins and 96 losses. They also are projected to have the third worst record in all of baseball. Now, one of the things that is beautiful to me, it almost brings a tear to my eye. Those who know me personally and have maybe listened to the show for a long time are aware that I absolutely despise the St. Louis Cardinals. They are my least favorite team in baseball. They have been for my entire life, which is, you might find interesting given that I'm a Tigers fan through and through, and they're in the National League and they don't match up too often. Well, I was 8 years old in 2006, and I will never let anyone forget the pain that they caused 8-year-old Scott Bentley. Also, then, it wasn't like they did that and then they got their revenge and they sucked for a while. Nope. They went over 500 for every single year of my life until a couple of years ago for the first time, literally since I was born. So seeing them have the projected second worst record in all of baseball actually brings a tear of joy to my eye, and I will sleep better tonight having read that number. 66 technically, but 65.8 projected wins for the St. Louis Cardinals. The Rockies, to no surprise to anyone, projected to have the worst record in all of baseball. The National League projected winners are the Atlanta Braves, still at top of the NL East. The Chicago Cubs projected to win the Central. Also, the only team projected to have a record over 500 in the NL Central. The Chicago Cubs, and then the NL West we already talked about. Also, the only projected team with an over. The Padres being projected to win fewer than 81 games and finish below 500 is mind-boggling to me. The Diamondbacks projected to finish well under 500. The Giants, 82 and 80, I guess, if you're rounding, so they're a game over 500. The Brewers, who just had the one seed in the National League a year ago, projected to finish at 81 and 81. Remarkable stuff here from PECOTA. The NL East I find fascinating. You have three teams all projected to finish with over 85 wins. The Marlins taking a step forward around 75 wins. The Nationals still kind of rebuilding and just traded their best pitcher away. So can't imagine that they're going to take much of a step forward. But that kind of battle between the top three teams of, the Braves, the Mets, and the Phillies is going to be such a fun battle to watch throughout the entire season. Odds of winning the division, the Braves at 47%, the Mets at 35.5%, the Phillies at just 16.5%, I find kind of interesting as well. I feel like I've said interesting 50 times. I apologize. The Braves have already had a handful of injuries going into camp, but Ronald Acuna Jr. promises that this is like the best he's felt in a season in ages. So that could be something to keep an eye out for. The Mets, we all know the offseason they lost some people. They also made some moves to make sure they still brought in some people. We'll see how they do. The Phillies are a mess. I don't even know. They have the talent, certainly, but like their GM, Dave Dombrowski, is like actively talking smack about their best players. I don't even know. Go listen to Locked On Phillies, one of the best programs that Locked On has to offer. But a fascinating battle will be happening and unraveling in the NL East for sure. Some other teams that just kind of jump out at me just for fun. The Pirates. I think this is the best the Pirates have been projected since I started doing this, and it's still below 500. But it's an exactly 80 and 82 record. Their rotation actually is not projected to even do that well, but they're still projected to have 80 wins. I think their rotation could be one of the better in the National League. I am very worried about the Pittsburgh. Well, I shouldn't say very worried. I'm actually the most optimistic I've been about a Pirates lineup probably since I started doing this show, and that's more of a testament to how bad previous lineups have been than like thinking that this lineup is really good. It's not really good, but it's better than the last like 3 or 4 years, which is worth something. But if they have health in their rotation, I really think that could be one of the better rotations. There's a lot of really young and fun pitchers in that starting rotation. The bullpen might still be a little bit of a shaky subject. I guess maybe that is where a lot of the runs might be given up. But something to keep an eye out for there. The Reds, after making the playoffs, are projected to finish 4th in the NL Central by PECOTA this year. Back to the American League. The Athletics are projected to have one of the better offenses in all of baseball. They actually are projected to have the single best offense in terms of just runs scored, literally in the entire American League. And a lot of that has to do with the park they play at. They play at a little league park. But on the flip side, they are projected to give up more runs than any other team in baseball not named the Colorado Rockies. My point is, go to FanDuel, bet the over on Athletics games this year. And I part of that is obviously park adjusted. I also think part of it is just the way their team is built. I think that would be the case, maybe not that dramatically, but I think that would be the case even if they played in what's like Miami, like a super pitcher-friendly park. You know, some people say that about Detroit. Like, they just have a really good lineup, legitimately. That is a better lineup than I genuinely do think most of the teams in the American League. It's just an absolutely putrid rotation. They have some young, good pitchers that are coming through the system that hopefully will be major league ready by the time that they move to Vegas. But golly, a team that is going to be in a lot of high-scoring games this year. Angels, we already talked about. I guess just putting a bow on the Tigers conversation to send you off on your way. I'm not bringing this up to like be an alarmist or be like, oh, look, like somebody doesn't have the Tigers projected to win first or win the division. But I do think that it's important to highlight those just as much as, you know, the fan graphs of the world that do project the Tigers to win the American League Central. And another important thing is PECOTA avoids extremes. And that is why I'm so blown away by not only just the Dodgers, but even the Mariners. Like, that is an outlier for PECOTA. They're so big on the bell curve and finding the middle of the bell curve that you don't usually see, right? Like, that's different than all other projection models. So you don't usually see the extremes because that's kind of accounted for in just the extreme, you know, unlikely scenarios of the bell curve, seeing some of these teams with that. But like, again, there's going to be more than one team in the American League that wins 90 games. PECOTA has their projection literally has the Mariners as the only team in the entire American League to surpass 90 wins, even surpass 88 wins. So I think all of that is important to remember. The Blue Jays have a 72% chance of making the postseason, and that is the second best odds in all of the American League. That's not even 3 out of 4 simulations them making the postseason. That's worse than 3 out of 4 odds, but it's the second best in the American League. So there's a lot of like, you're really splitting hairs, and it's like, oh, like, the Tigers at 83 wins. Well, again, if you zoom out and look at the rest of the American League, they're kind of all in that, like, I don't know, frothy middle of just like, there's a ton that could happen in the middle and around those like wild card contender teams. And because the American League Central is weak and is weaker than any of the other divisions in the American League, and outside of the NL Central, maybe any other division in baseball, the teams that are in the mix for the wild card hunt in the AL Central will almost certainly be in the mix for the American League Central crown as well. I have the Tigers winning the AL Central, but I'm very biased, and that's no surprise to anyone. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back tomorrow as we start talking more about spring training ball. I will have biggest questions and biggest storylines heading into spring training games this weekend at some point this week as well. Okay? Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope, and I'll catch y'all tomorrow, baby. Go Tigers.